Dr. Lori Baudino, and I'm doing collaborative check-ins today with Dr. Mona Delahooke. And she is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 30 years of experience and an incredible book that I use as a resource called Beyond Behaviors. Mona, thanks for coming today. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm thrilled, Lori. Good to see you again.
Yeah, so today is all about continuing the conversation with parents to know what's out there and to realize that when we have our children, no matter what age, that when we see behaviors, we can get support. You know, there's so much that feelings can come up of like, is this normal? Is it age appropriate? Is this my fault? Is this because of the timing right now? What's going on? I love to hear, what's kind of your first response when a parent might be saying, hey, my child's having all these big behaviors? Big question.
Oh, no, it's a great question. And it's one of my favorite questions because actually that through my career, that would be the main reason that parents contacted me, is to better understand their child's behaviors, like a behavior that was concerning to them. And so the first thing I want to say about that is that I think we need to learn, it would be helpful for us to learn to not be afraid of our child's behaviors and assume that they mean something bad. Because in our culture, really, we tend to think about, it's kind of how we're inculcated to think about behaviors as either good or bad. And really, behaviors should be looked at, I think, as neutrally useful for what they tell us about our child. So when we look at behaviors as good or bad, I kind of call it looking at behaviors as the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. You know, how what we see as the way the child moves their body or what they say with their voice, that's a behavior, right? But the underneath an iceberg, the 90% below the waterline that's invisible is what's driving the behaviors, what's causing the behaviors, and also that useful, rich information about what it tells us about children. So I'm urging, so one of the things I say is just don't worry about challenging behaviors in your child, really become curious. Yeah. And they can tell us really awesome things about how we can raise our child and how we can help them feel more comfortable, more grounded in themselves, and also how we can build trust in our relationship with them. Mm-hmm. By viewing behaviors not as something we want to get rid of necessarily or automatically reinforce or punish, but something that we can learn from.
Yeah, I love that. I think children are so incredible. They're brilliant. And so I often find myself smile when a parent or a child will present with a behavior, and it's not because I wish that upon them or that I'm trying to minimize it, but I realize like how brilliant they are. Like what a great adaptive skill that you just did. And I'll say, they'll say, but why does he, why does she, or why does he keep doing it over and over? And I'll say, so brilliant. He's going to keep doing it until we learn the message that's needed. And it's just amazing when it keeps showing up. It keeps showing up. And so
it keeps manifesting almost like a gift. But I know parents are like, oh no, please don't tell me that. It's terrible. But I know that smile. I have it myself. And I want parents to not know that I'm not, it's not that I'm not taking it seriously. We have to, I really believe we have to take behavior seriously. But the smile is, don't worry. This is gonna tell us something really cool about your child,
yes.
Right?
Yes, that under the iceberg. And that iceberg analogy and understanding of looking at the whole child and looking at underneath the layers versus just what's on top is so helpful, because there are so many variables that go into that present moment. And I know, with me, I look at movement, I look at the sensory system, and I know you do as well. What else is under that iceberg that is important to think about for the child?
Yeah, well, there's we can think of 4 huge bucket categories underneath the iceberg. One, as you just said, is the physical body. So a physical body is going to have behaviors that represent what's going on inside the physical body. What would be some examples of that? Low blood sugar in children who have diabetes, for example. a toothache, a tummy ache, in toddlers, maybe incubating a cold or a virus, or in any age actually.
Yeah.
What happened? Or another huge one, sleep, sleep deficit. So we know that our physical body is the thing that manifests our behaviors first. It's the biggest thing we need to look at. It's the first thing I look at. And I know I love your work that you do as well, because if, for example, either we or our child is on a chronic sleep deficit, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's going to end up in what we call regulatory problems. That is, difficulties controlling our emotions or behaviors, and this whole ability to have less tolerance for life's challenges. And we're humans are less resilient when we don't have enough sleep. So that's an example of that first category of the physical body. And maybe you want to say a few more things about that before I go through the other three categories, but the body, right?
Yeah, the body is so important. I wanted to make it personal too. I was going to say that my own daughter, I don't want to go too far off track, but my own daughter experiencing coming back out of this pandemic, meaning like the life opening up, the world opening up, even in her body, seeing the overload of the difference, the shift from her body from being at home to being out in the world, in increased sounds, increased touch, increased textures, problem solving, what she has to do, and navigating all the people and how to stay safe, and all those factors came in. And by the end of the day, I knew as a parent, I said, we're gonna have an early night because we had to go to an appointment and come home. So we're gonna get that sleep. And she came home and felt like she had a headache. And while I could have thought, well, it's just a headache, everyone gets headaches, I thought to her, that's a superpower of yours, a super senses. You took in everything so heightened in that body of yours that your body's telling you you need a break, you need to shut down. And she smiled even with a headache and said, okay, I'm gonna go to bed. And just that being aware of like that body is taking in so much, even energetically, we could go into like spiritually, but just even more so that body reaction to the environment that we might not even notice so much.
Yes, that's a brilliant example. I love that, because you did so much there. So just let me say, the power of observation, the power of observation. None of us and none of our children have ever been essentially forced to stay at home unexpectedly for a long period of time. And so when you did go out with her, when you noticed, when you had a day, which used 3 months ago would have been an average day, going out to an appointment, in her body, she was all of a sudden taking in all these things that were different than the input she had at home. It's no wonder a headache might have developed. It's like, again, the body is so knowledgeable. And how awesome that you noticed, you reflected on it with her, and she resonated. Her body mind agreed with you. Like, yes, mommy, I'm tired. I think I need to go to bed. And what a perfect example of co-regulation. When we talk about what our child needs, if we see that need and we can partner with them to say, oh man, you're not alone. I see you, honey. I'm going to go to bed early too. It's just this like, it's this beautiful synchrony where we're seeing each other. And that leads to the second big category of what's underneath the iceberg, which you already mentioned, and that is sensations. So the only way we take in our world is through our senses, through what we see, what we smell, what we taste, what we feel. All of our senses, how we move, is the portal to being human. And so some of our children are more sensitive to sensation, essentially. There's a big variation. Pediatricians really don't talk about this at all, and I think they should. Our children we are wired differently through our genetics and through the pregnancy and through our constitution to take in information through the world in different ways. And until we understand that, we really won't be able to help our children. notice that about themselves and become familiar with the different, some of us are different, have different sensations in the world. I've worked with many children who have difficulties processing background and foreground noises at the same time.
Yes.
So an example of where you have to do that would be a busy restaurant or a mall where you have music going on, and then there's noise in back of you and in front of you. And some of my kids that I've seen would have like really challenging behaviors in malls, and then we'd like, oh, let's deconstruct this. Right. Their nervous system was becoming overloaded, and so their tolerance level would decline, and all of a sudden you'd have a very what looked to be angry, upset child, but it was really coming again from their body, from their sensory processing.
Right. I've seen that even timing is a big element, a big quality to movement, and timing plays out where the child might have a big upset during a transition, and their body movement was quite sustained and engaged in what they were doing and really enjoying their space. And just the undercurrent of just like slowing down, and then the switch, like to get inside, like the teacher or the parent being like, let's go. And all of a sudden that switch, it wasn't so much that they're being defiant, I don't agree with you. It was just that their body to upregulate to say, okay, now I'm coming in the classroom was a big shift. And so there's, a meltdown. It's like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yes. And that is one thing I think we need to become way more aware of, is those shifts require so much in the human body, that what we think of as transitions, right? From one thing to another, that shift. And for many kids in our education system, because our education system isn't very integrated with neuroscience yet, sometimes children who have difficulty in the shifts are thought of as being non-compliant or using what we call non-preferred behaviors. Right. But no, it's not non-compliance. It's a stress reaction. It's a stress behavior. Stuart Shanker says we have to understand that for some kids, it's not their will that is the problem. It's their body connection that's sensing stress, and that's what's causing the behavioral challenge.
Right. What else is underneath that iceberg?
Oh yeah, so the four main categories, we've gone through: the body, sensory processing, and the other two are thoughts and emotions. So an emotion, of course, they all blend to each other because we're all one mind body, but just in those large categories, emotions can be linked to a paired experience. So, let's just say a child who has to have immunizations, they get into the doctor's office, they have a memory of the shot, and they start to cry. That's a paired experience, okay? So that would be emotions. And then the other one would be thoughts. And that could be a child might have a conscious thought at the same situation, like you're driving into the parking lot of the pediatricians and they start to say, Mommy, do I have to get a shot? Because they remember. Their thought is saying, uh-oh, I might have to get a shot. So our thoughts can also impact our behavior. So body, sensations, thoughts, and emotions.
Wonderful. It's so helpful to see those different elements and also that they all combined. And in addition, that we can understand that it's not just one simple response of like bad, or difficult child, like the labels. And we can say, hey, but there's all these pieces that are playing into this behavior. Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was inclusion for children. Okay. And there are a lot of labels that are put on children for their interactions with one another, whether they're including one another or pushing one another away, or they're going into smaller groups or bigger groups. And as a whole, the idea is to teach inclusion and support inclusion. I also know that children are navigating these systems that we've talked about, like their thoughts, their feelings, the sensory, their bodies. And oftentimes I notice when I'm working with children that have challenges in their interactions, that social learning, that it's less about being mean or exclusive and more about the difficulty of problem solving, how to navigate more than one person. And there's more to the story. There's more to the interaction. But then as adults, there tends to be the stigma of like that mean child or the bully or, the labels that come up. I have to take a breath even saying that. So I don't want to minimize that we're not paying attention to hurtful situations. While I also was wondering, as I'm saying that, any of your thoughts about the intricacy of inclusion, what that might mean for a child, what has to happen in the body and in their minds to be able to do those skills? Because I really see it as a skill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And an acquired skill. In other words, you have to live it. It has to be embodied.
Yes.
So it's a great question. And the way you described the question is partly the answer. And that is that the way we are able to develop what we call social problem solving or social emotional learning is an embodied process. And so when a child has differences in what we call individual differences in their development or in their brain wiring, whereas they are taking in the world maybe a little bit differently than other peers or many other children, and they're included and expected to be in a world that feels often really threatening on the submerged invisible level, on the body level, then you will have behavioral interactions that might look goofy. They may look like bullying, in fact. They may look like being rude, let's just say.
Yes.
And what it is that is the developmental delay. That is the inability of the environment to match the safety needs, what I call the neuroceptive needs, in the words of the polyvagal theory, the neuroceptive needs of physiological safety for that child. And that is one of my pet peeves with many of the IEPs that I sit on as an expert or as the psychologist for the child, is that we are not understanding that we have to create relationships and environments that are matched to the child's individual needs for safety. And that includes the environment and the relationships. So it's a powerful question. And I think, again, the theme throughout all of this is really compassion and self-compassion. So compassion for the child who is looking like they're struggling a lot and having difficulties. And maybe we may be attributing these, again, bad behaviors to the child, well, when in fact, the child is stressed.
Right.
And when we give the child the benefit of the doubt of being stressed and we adjust our expectations and adjust things for the child, all of a sudden you see their social engagement system starting to flower because humans want to engage with each other.
Right.
It's
right.
our natural state.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that and expanding on it. It's a tricky line, I'm aware, of how to see it and then what to do.
Yeah. And we don't really have a lot of language for it because in schools, we are stuck in the compliant and non-compliant behaviors or preferred and non-preferred behaviors. We're stuck in this kind of bilateral, outdated paradigm where we don't understand that behaviors are very meaningful. Instead of looking at compliance, we need to look at relational safety, physiological safety, because that's what's causing the difficulty for the child, not that they don't have a good enough reinforcement schedule or that the caregivers aren't consistent enough. Again, that's kind of the older paradigm that I discuss in my book that we now know through neuroscience. It's much more complicated than that. Right. It's not about a child choosing to be good or bad.
Right.
It's about a child who is a complex dynamic system reacting to their environment.
Right. So when these disrupts happen, I had to physically try to put a name to it. When these disrupts happen, do you equally go to each of the children involved? Do you go towards one or the other? What might you say to those IEPs or to the parents?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is safety first. We want to make sure everybody's safe. So if there's physical altercation involved, of course, we want to step in and make sure everybody's safe. We're not talking about being extra permissive and letting everything just play out on its own. We have to be the adults and make sure everybody's safe. But I think the attitude that we come in on can be one of compassion for all students involved.
Right.
Oftentimes, what I've observed is that when teachers or aides go in and try to break things up or help, it would be to go to, well, I saw you do X to
Right.
Johnny, so can you please apologize? And I understand that is that's a polite thing to do, to want to have the child, but it's really a kind of superficial way of going about it. I think what I would say first of all is empathy with the child who was scared, and it's probably both, but the child who may have received an interaction that was unexpected from their peer to say, "Sweetheart, I saw that. I'm with you. Let's see if we can work something out here with hearing about from Johnny." And if Johnny was the perpetrator, he probably won't be able to talk about it. So you want to wait. You want to de-escalate the situation first and say, this is a problem. I'm glad you're both safe. And is there anything you guys would like to say right now? And then just have a little bit of a cooling off period. But I think at a larger level, if you have children who are included in classrooms, it's really important for aides and teachers to help the other kids in the class to see that we have a neurodiverse way of being in the world, and that children's brains we're all different. And neurodiversity, it includes, we can broaden it to skin color. We can broaden it to, we're not all the same, we're different, and we can appreciate those differences. And the classrooms that I've seen that successfully manage children who have difficulty socializing are the ones where the teacher embraces that child and can explain, maybe sometimes along with the parent, in really beautiful words that everyone understands. Our friend here sometimes can get upset if it's too noisy in the classroom. So if that happens, maybe you can ask them if they need help, or come and get me and we'll solve it together, so that we can describe differences as not something that's negative, but something that we can all appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And learn from. So we
And
all
learn
have
from.
them. Yeah.
We all have them at just different degrees.
Right. Yes. And I'm noticing even like now during this pandemic, the parents have been the teachers. And so thinking about how they might have a sibling dynamic, or even a dynamic between themselves and the child, and even continuing that dialogue, the same language could happen. I'm imagining, as you're saying that, of like, I'm noticing when there's lots of noise, or when I haven't told you the plan, that kind of gets us into a bit of tension in this household, or the two siblings are interacting. And I love being able to see both sides. And like you said, it's not about being permissive or condoning hurtful behavior. No. It's about kind of dropping in and saying, if this was easy, if this was safe, this wouldn't be happening. So we need to look at what was happening that you felt so unsafe that you moved your body. I say movement versus behaviors, like something moved. Right. And then what happened over here that you received it? What was going on? So
right, it's so compassionate. Yes. And we have to understand also that sometimes the child won't know. It might be subconscious, so it adds another layer of complexity. But sometimes, if it's the polyvagal theory describes as neuroception, which is subconscious detection of threat or safety, we may be picking up a tone of voice or a look or something that's below our level of consciousness. So if we ask the child to tell us what might be going on, they may not be able to. So sometimes we have to just give the child the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what, something happened here is a situation, and I'm sure at some point we'll be able to figure it out. But for now, let's just see if we're all okay, and follow the child's lead to see if there's something that they want to say. But each child's going to want to express their emotions and their feelings, and if we can let them do that without too much judgment, I think that also is healing.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot. There's so much. Oh my goodness. Parents became teachers overnight. Siblings are smashed together during the day without their approval. I mean, this has really been a tough time for families.
Right. Yeah. And, tough and learning, hopefully we keep learning.
Yes.
Knowing that there are these layers is also validating. I'm a parent as well, like validating to hear that if we take a pause or know that the child may not be able to communicate it, that we don't have to rush to get that end result. We don't have to get that like bow wrapped around it, that it might take time, or it will take time.
It absolutely will, because really being able to be literate with our behaviors and emotions is a developmental process that continues to develop through early adulthood. So yes, we should. Patience is such a wonderful, I know we have a need or a tendency, I know I did as a mom, to fix things right away and to have everything kind of wrapped up in a bow. But if we can be patient and reflective, and I think the thing that our children pick up from the most is how calm we're staying.
Right.
If we're able to regulate ourselves and find our center, and sometimes we can't, and that's okay too. It's all going to happen. It's all this surfing the life of a parent and of a teacher. We're just like, okay, but to take a breath or stand back, if you get triggered, it's better to just take a moment and pause, because if you don't, that's when we say or do things that we, later feel bad about or regret. So,
right.
Yeah. For the book, I studied a lot the work of Dr. Kristin Neff, who researches self-compassion. And I think for some parents, maybe that sounds like a kind of a fuzzy term or something that's kind of optional or just fluffy and not very important. But the research she did is solid science. They found that self-compassion, that is self-compassion for yourself and giving yourself the benefit of the doubt and kind of patting yourself on this is a tough moment, is correlated with better health outcomes, mental and physical health outcomes for caregivers. Mm-hmm. So I would say be easy on yourself and understand how hard this is. And the easier you are on yourself, the more regulated you're likely to be as a parent. And that is what builds resilience in our kids. So it's kind of a cool thing to think about, that the better we take care of ourselves, it's not optional. It's not this cherry on top for parents. It's really the part of the building block of our child's future resilience and ability to manage tough times. So I guess that's the main message, is just really treasure yourself and how hard this job of parenting is. And you'll be really in a good position to surf the waves of these hard times.
Thank you so much, Mona, for coming on and sharing your wisdom and compassion for children and parents. And how can families learn more, reach out to you?
Oh, yeah, thanks. My website at monadelahooke.com. And I have a search engine, and I've written a lot about different topics, all sorts of different topics about behaviors and challenges and everything. So, and then on Facebook, Mona Delahooke PhD is my Facebook page, and then Twitter and Instagram at Mona Delahooke. So I just love the interaction with families. So stay in touch on social media, and just such a pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Mona.